Hello and welcome one last time to our special edition of KnowTalks that are held live from the Frankfurt Book Fair. These sessions that started on the 19th of October and with 2 daily sessions and that have continued till today with the last session that we are having now. These KnowTalks are brought to you by the United Nations Development Programme and the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Knowledge Foundation. This session is also delivered in English. However, interpretation into Arabic and French is available. You only need to click on the globe on the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language. Also, please drop your questions and I'll be asking them to our speaker later on. So our session today is dear to my heart and very dear to my speaker's heart. It is about volunteerism. And we think that volunteerism is very important and it can really change the world. And it is a major contributor to the Sustainable Development Goals. This is why we have named our session Changing the World One Volunteer at a Time. I am honored to have with me today Dr. Tapiwa Kamuruko, Policy Specialist and Head of Research and Evidence at the United Nations Volunteers. Hello, Tapiwa.
Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So, Tapiwa, you will be telling us about the relationship between volunteering and the 2030 agenda. You will also be giving us some insights about volunteerism or the state of volunteerism in the world, and some insights from the 2022 State of the World's Volunteerism report that is also available online. And also about volunteering in development frameworks. Tapiwa, can I ask you to go 2 slides before I have something to say? Yes. So we included this visual because as we believe as a project, as UNDP's knowledge project in the power of volunteerism, we have part of our team UNVs, and also we also hire experts from the online volunteering platform, and this visual was made by an online volunteer.
Oh, that's very nice, because the online volunteering is growing in leaps and bounds. As we talk now, I think we have more than 6,000 to 7,000 online volunteers, but our database of online volunteers is up to 21,000 who are willing at any given moment to take on assignments and contribute to peace and development.
Thank you. You may proceed with your presentation.
Thank you very much. Let me start by the basics. I know the audiences and viewers or those following this program may not be very familiar with UNV. What is UNV, the organization? Who are we? The United Nations Volunteers Program, popularly known as UNV, it's the United Nations arm that was mandated since 1971 to promote volunteerism for development. What does this mean? The organization spearhead advocacy and promotion of volunteerism across the terrain of development. What I mean here is we work with member states, we work with the United Nations system to mobilize different categories of volunteers and deploy them in their programs and projects where they deliver development effectiveness through the spirit of volunteerism. By definition, volunteerism is carrying out some work without any expectations for remuneration, for salary, for monetary expectations. So we have in our database thousands of people who are carrying out work across the globe, across the world, without any expectation of monetary benefits. So that's what UNV does. In addition, of course, it is the mandate of UNV to promote volunteerism globally by encouraging partners to integrate volunteerism into development programming. were set up, as I said, in 1971 through a UN General Assembly resolution. And since then, it has been growing. In 1976, UNV was given another mandate, that of promoting youth development strategies. And also the listeners or viewers may be interested to know that it is also the mandate of UNV to come up with strategies on how to encourage various ways of youth development. Of course, we are managed by UNDP. UNV is our administrator, and we work together within the UN system through UNDP. Our vision is to create a world where volunteerism is recognized and valued within society as a way for all people and countries to achieve peace and development. And this, we are saying, we do this by encouraging people. It's not employment, no, but we encourage people to register and get a number on the roster. And then at any given time, they are called upon to take on assignment as and when they become available. Our goal is to promote the value and global recognition of volunteerism across peace and development issues. And we work with partners who recognize also that there's need to get qualified, highly motivated people who we call UN volunteers. I'll skip some of the slides because some of this information, some of the viewers, they know it already, but there are certain elements that I would like to highlight. For example, the added value of UN volunteers. We mobilize people as volunteers. This enables people to participate. And by participating, it makes development people-centered. And when it becomes people-centered, people take ownership of the results as well as the outcomes of development. This is an important factor. And also, when we bring together volunteers, they work with the communities at the lowest level of development, where they are development animators and help for society to integrate volunteerism into their own planning, thinking, and implementation. At the start of the Agenda 2030, UNV came up with strategies on how to enhance, how to expand, how to increase the recognition of volunteerism and development, noting that volunteerism, I mean, in any society that you go, everybody do identify with volunteerism in their own language. They will tell you that volunteerism is part of our DNA. Volunteerism is part of our lives. So we see volunteerism as traditional means of implementation, and that complements participatory mechanism for people engagement. And this is important. In terms of people need to understand, need to own development, need to be involved. So volunteerism is a strong and powerful means that enables people to engage, to make inputs in the design of development programs that affect them and their own. So volunteers, we see them as drivers of the change and instruments in achieving the goals 2030, without which we think it will become very difficult. There are certain things that I want to highlight here that UNV is involved. One, we work with the partners at a global level to ensure that, one, we have policies that talk and promote volunteerism, and also that there is knowledge about volunteerism. What is it? But sometimes people don't have a common understanding of what is volunteerism. So we work to enhance the understanding of volunteerism globally, and also we work to address gaps. The report that I'm holding today, the State of the World Volunteerism Report, has identified gaps and disparities between different groups. For example, minorities, marginalized people, including on gender. Even in the 21st century, we still have challenges. So these are some of the things that we say as UNV. We work on strategies to cover, to bridge those genders, to bridge the possibility that anybody who is willing, who is interested to offer themselves up for volunteering, there are no barriers. They can do that. And we provide advice, especially to member states, especially those that are willing to put together strategies and policies to ensure that volunteerism can happen at a country level. Another element is that we support intergovernmental dialogues so that we have a common understanding on volunteering across the world. And this is important so that there are elements sometimes where volunteers are on the receiving end. So if we have a common understanding on standards, on protocols, on what volunteerism, it helps people to understand volunteerism. Globally, these are some of the statistics that I picked. Globally, we have so many people. When I say people, I'm talking about professionals who are on our database, who are willing at any given time to take a volunteer assignment, ranging from young people, the youth. These are qualified people, and also people with disabilities. We are giving the possibility and opportunity to volunteer. And as we talk today, the number of volunteers who are deployed are 50-50 in terms of UN volunteers, 50 females, 50 males, and this is a great gender parity that we have worked to reach. I also wanted to share with the viewers and those following this program that in this research that we published and launched at the beginning of this year, it was established that about 862 million people volunteer at least once a month. This is huge. If we're the country called volunteer, this will be the biggest country of workers, people doing something. And more than twice many people volunteer informally than formally. What I mean here is, when you look about global volunteering, 30% is formal volunteering. These are volunteers who are working through organizations like UNDP, UNICEF, UNFPA, and others. But the largest cohort of volunteers are the people out there. 70% are informal volunteers. When disasters comes our way, it is these people. These are the people who go there first and provide support to ensure that those in need are catered for. So this is some of the findings that we have in the State of the World's Volunteerism report for 2022. We partner with many organizations, especially within the UN system, who use volunteers, work with volunteers in different of their programs and so forth. You will notice that UNDP is leading there with almost 2,000, and then we have UNICEF, and then UN Women and so forth. But we also work with the UN missions. For example, if you look at the UN mission in South Sudan, almost 710 volunteers who are supporting the operations of the mission in that country. Some of the information there, these are best practices where volunteerism has made a difference, like in Nepal. You see pictures of volunteers working with communities in a project that was designed to make a change in their lives. This is a project in Burkina where volunteers are working at the community level to create an environment where peace and development is conducive. And in this particular project, this is a group that is dealing with microcredit and loans for women. What you can notice here is that it's at the community level, and these are the volunteers are highly qualified technicians in this field who go out there to support women to engage into an income generating project. Then in Uzbekistan, we have that project where volunteers help to train more than 1,700 community volunteers on health prevention. And this is massive by any scale. If volunteers can go out there and make an intervention where more than 1,700 people are trained to deliver services at the community level. I also want to share with you that every year we have what we call the International Volunteer Day. This is an advocacy day that the United Nations set aside to target efforts to promote, to do advocacy, to highlight, and to make people aware about the power of volunteerism. We use this particular day to ensure that we share as much as it is possible anything about volunteering, particularly what volunteerism brings to society, to communities, as well as to individuals. So on the 5th of December every year, the whole world sit together to celebrate the contribution of volunteers and also the ethos, to recognize the ethos of volunteering for peace and development objectives. I want to probably finish with, so that we can have a conversation with the new approach to our work. We think that if we provide evidence, if we provide knowledge, if we provide the facts, the data about the power of volunteering, how volunteering contributes to development, member states and practitioners will be able to embrace volunteerism much better, to the extent that since 2020, UNV has set up a knowledge portal in which you are putting, it's going to be a repository of everything volunteering. By here, I mean evaluation reports, how to set up a project that involves volunteering, policies on volunteer, everything, templates on how to work with volunteers and so forth. So the UNV knowledge portal on volunteerism, it's a one-stop shop where those involved, those interested in enlisting volunteering for development can go and find whatever information they need. We continuously, on a regular basis, make sure that we have renewed information, we have new information from other member states, from our own selves, from other research, from even the research done by other partners. We load it into this knowledge portal so that we are able to share as much as possible with the member states. As usual, we say we are inspiration in action, but what we mean here is we are inspired by the ethos of giving to society, by the solidarity that we give to member states, solidarity that we give to development, solidarity that we give even within the UN system to achieve much more with less. Thank you. For now, I want to stop here. I just wanted to say these few words so that we can then have a conversation as well as receive questions from your viewers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tapiwa. For me and for us, we think that that volunteers and UN volunteers are the gems of the United Nations, and volunteers are the gems of the world because they are so selfless and they are keen to contribute to making the world a better place. Tapiwa, you have mentioned that there are many volunteers in the world. The number was like 680 million volunteers a month. So 680 million people have volunteer at least once a month. So it is a big number. However, are there enough volunteers? Is that enough?
I think 862 is not a small number. And the number continues to grow. In fact, at one point, and working with other partners, there's even an assumption that on an annual basis, 3 billion volunteers, 3 billion people are volunteering their services. But we are still to come up with a good methodology to estimate these figures. These figures are huge and massive. And if all these figures, if these people, volunteers, are put at the disposal of development, I can assure you that they'll make a huge difference. And as per the title of this session, they'll make that huge difference in terms of changing the world.
And how do you account for informal volunteerism?
Informal volunteerism is the biggest. It probably is the biggest by all means. 70% of all volunteering is done informally. It's massive, it's huge. And there have been calls by different people to formalize informal volunteering, but it is good as it is. So we acknowledge informal volunteering at the UNV in our current strategic framework, and we are trying to measure unpaid work, including volunteers, to the extent that we have been thinking of how to measure the work of informal volunteers, their contribution to even to the GDP of member states. So we are working on that to come up with a methodology to measure informal volunteering work. As we talk today, we have come up working with one of our partners, ILO, International Labour Organization, with a way of measuring formal volunteering. But we are yet to come up with a measure of informal volunteering. We recognize informal volunteering because it is the biggest and they deliver more, and sometimes without any structure. As I said at the beginning, when there's a disaster, the people who go there, who arrive first, are informal volunteers, especially at the community level, with very basic appliances, tools to work on. But these are the people who make the world tick as it is.
Okay. I'm sorry for looking at my screen, for checking my screen all the time. I'm just trying to check the questions we are getting from the audience. Yes.
I can also, while the audience are coming in, share a little bit about the project, the report that you are holding.
Sure.
The 2022 State of the World Volunteerism Report was conceptualized on the background of a 21st century social contract. 21st century with so many problems, climate change emergencies, increasing poverty, increasing inequalities. So we wanted to find out how volunteerism could help to address some of these issues. So when you read the report, you'll find that we have made recommendations, for example, on how the state and volunteers can work together. There are three models that have been proffered there. One is to do with the governance, deliberative governance, that if volunteers are involved in the decision-making level by government, they will bring in good ideas, because volunteers work with people on the ground. They understand better the issues on the ground. So when they are involved by governments or decision makers at the table of where decisions are being made, it will make a huge difference. Then the other model is to do with innovation. Volunteers are very innovative, because when we're talking about volunteers, sometimes people think that we are talking about people who are not professionals. No, volunteers range from neurosurgeons, doctors, specialist doctors, engineers, development animators. So these volunteers have so much skill that if they are allowed to innovate, they can bring change to development in all contexts of development. So these models, they've been tested, and there is a feeling that if they are pursued, they can make a difference to the collaboration between the state and volunteers in the work that they do. And also the other element is that if volunteers are allowed to co-create with the state, they produce, or the state will produce better products, because there's more ownership of the development. They have more ownership of outcomes. So these three models, if pursued, will make a difference in the relationship between volunteers and the state, and at the end of the day, the delivery of the Sustainable Development Agenda.
You have mentioned some of the STEM fields that that volunteers can like where we find volunteers, like you have mentioned we can find volunteers that are doctors, nurses, etc. But what are the fields or backgrounds that are most in demand for volunteers?
Development is diverse, from health right up to development at the lowest level. From our database, our roster, we have different fields because we work with UN agencies. We work with, for example, UNHCR, where we are providing support to refugees. We have lawyers who are doing the registration of volunteers. We're working with UNICEF. We're coming up with strategies on the protection of children. We are working with the WHO on Ebola. When Ebola came in West Africa many years ago, and more recently in Uganda and DRC Congo, we have medical doctors who are working in those areas. So we have different, even in communication, you find that we have, I don't know, there are so many communication specialists, UN volunteers who are working in this area. So we have volunteers right across many professional fields, from medical to communication to development, with engineers, and right up to water and sanitation. So we have almost all development fields. We have volunteers.
So it is at all levels and at most development fields, as they are really broad.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is why we are saying from the findings and recommendations in the SWVR 2022, that the barriers that are there, like on gender, if, for example, if the barriers that restricts women, young people, marginalized groups, minority groups are addressed, it means that these people can provide their services without any hindrance. You know, there are cultural issues, sometimes religious, that hinders certain gender or certain age code from volunteering. And also there's another element. We are also saying without information, it's very difficult. We want to bridge the gap by investing in knowledge brokering for evidence. This is another area, so that when a country comes out and say they want to integrate volunteerism in national development frameworks, it will be sectoral policy in the ministry, they have the data, they have the information, they know what they want to do, and it's there, it's available. So these are some of the factors that we think would enhance not only the efficacy of volunteering, but also its recognition in development, so that volunteerism can take its position in development. Let me say this, you know, the more we talk, the more one gets emotional about the subject. Sometimes people think volunteerism is for people who have nothing to do. Quite to the contrary, volunteering is for everybody. I will not be surprised that one day you might take sabbatical from your job and say you want to be a volunteer and make this world a better world with your skills. That is volunteering. So volunteering is a means through which you can express solidarity with community that needs certain services in order to move forward.
Great and touching. You have mentioned once again here, you have tapped on marginalized or vulnerable groups, like, and also in your presentation, how you mentioned that in the UNV, for example, you have 50% female and 50% male, and also the big number of people with disabilities that are also hired in your program. But how do you ensure that? How do you ensure to have marginalized people from marginalized groups on board with you?
One of the biggest statements that and also push that the Secretary General of the United Nations has given is for equality and equity, and UNV has been given a specific responsibility to make sure that people living with disabilities are also given the same possibility to volunteer, and UNV is doing that. Okay, and also the minorities. Imagine the minorities, most of whom they are living those usually hard to reach areas where development is very minimal. But these are the people who understand their development context better than the people who would come and say, probably here, this is good for you, this is good for you. So what we are saying here is, if the minorities, the people who are at the back of development planning are given the possibility to input into their own, into what is imagined to be good for them, they will make better choices. And this will respond to the whole mantra of leaving no one behind. So if the minorities are given the opportunities, they'll bring development articulated in their own language, indigenous language, in their own idioms, in their own language. Then when we talk about marginalized communities, it's a broad range of how development planning has been in the past, where there's trickle down from top to down. And we are saying it should come from down to top to inform the decisions on what they want. I think I've had so many reports and evaluation where communities have said, we didn't want this project here. What we wanted was a project here, but the project was influenced by planners who visited once and started planning from headquarters, and they came and parachuted a project that was not of interest. So we are saying marginalized communities and those minority communities, they know what is good for them. And if they're involved, they are consulted, they know better. More so if they are volunteers. The thing about volunteerism is that if somebody is volunteering, you are not seen as if you have any personal interest in it, even if you also stand to benefit from the development. But you are a neutral broker of information that is good for you and your community. That's the good thing about the minorities and the marginalized communities. So we feel that if they are given the possibility, if they are recognized in development planning, they bring better development than the approach that we have at the moment.
Definitely. And here, as you have mentioned, development programs, if in their planning and in all their stages, planning, implementation, etc., if they don't include and involve the target groups, the program is
doomed to fail.
True, they are going to fail.
You can talk about young people. These days, young people are saying, if it is not done by young people, it's not for them. And period, this is non-negotiable. Because many years back, we used to draft, to design projects that we felt these are good for the young people. But the young people say, no, how can adults know our interest? So if it is not designed by them, it's not for them. So in many projects, we're involving young people. If you look at some programs of some of our partners, like UNFPA, UNICEF, particularly at UNFPA, the Adolescent Reproductive Health Programs, you see a number of young people who are volunteers, who are doing a peer-to-peer education. It's better for a young person to talk to a young person than an adult to talk to a young person about certain issues, such as on reproductive health. So these are some of the innovations that are in this State of the World Volunteerism report, that if young people, if marginalized communities are given the opportunity to champion the development causes, they'll pass the word better than in the past, where the message is, it trickles down from top to down.
I will move from youth to the elderly with a question from the audience that says, we as adults and seniors, elderly, we want to mobilize our experience and knowledge in supporting the volunteering mission. What are some mechanisms and how can we do so? How can we volunteer?
The focus has been on young people many times. You remember in 2010, what we now call the Arab Spring and so forth. This was a point in history where young people said, you are not seeing us. You are ignoring us. Hello, look at us. Now, the elderly, some of them are professional, not some of them, they are professionals. They've been raising their hands to say, we have retired, but we are not tired. Get my point. We have retired, but we are not tired. Now we are helping set up projects. Sometimes we call them silver volunteers because their heads are silver. They are, because some of them have so much experience, so much skills, so much interest, and they have experience. And we cannot just ignore this. The fact that they've retired does not make that they cannot contribute. I can tell you that UNV, together with other partners, we are trying to come up with a modality that recognizes the retired but not tired volunteers. And in fact, we have one modality called expert volunteers. These are experts, people who have retired, who are out there. It's already in place. We want to expand this because the voices have been getting loud and louder for the elder to say, look, we still want to make a contribution to humanity. And I think we are busy in the background, behind the curtains, working out a modality that will cater and, I mean, capture the imagination of the elderly and bring them back into contribution through their skills.
And this is part of the leave no one behind principle also, of course.
Absolutely.
Another question from the audience, should countries establish and design volunteer-related ministries or authorities?
What we have encouraged is they may not be
Sorry, and would this support your mission?
The way we have been working with member states since the founding or the setting up of UNV in 1971, one is to provide or support with the infrastructure of policies, volunteer schemes, and even laws. There are a number of countries that now have laws, but we really don't see the need to have a ministry of volunteerism. Volunteerism is attached sometimes to the ministries of youth, to ministries of development, or to some government or semi-government, quasi-government organizations or parties that are assigned to deal with volunteerism. And we work, yes, this will help our mission in that it becomes easier for us to direct our technical support to ensure that that volunteerism is being harnessed to the capacity in those countries, following a systematic approach, following a way that recognizes the ways in which volunteerism can best be tapped, can best be harnessed for development.
Another question from the audience about exchange, like I'll say it. I just started last week my first volunteering experience with UN Habitat Tunisia office. I want to ask if there is any exchange platform for volunteers to exchange and learn from each other's experience.
As part of the management cycle of volunteers, when volunteers get the assignment, they are provided with the possibility for peer-to-peer learning. This helps them to understand, to settle, and to be able to manage themselves with the correct expectations of what they're expected to do in terms of volunteering. That's one. When they leave, we're not just saying hello, bye. We also want to tap on their knowledge. There are also chances that they can continue to be paired within a group of people where they mentor other new volunteers who are joining. Because we don't encourage volunteers to be volunteers for life. We want them to come for 4 years and then they leave. So, but those who have volunteered for 4 or 5 years, we expect them to continue plowing back their experience and knowledge to other upcoming or incoming volunteers so that we can continuously use best practices in volunteering to those who are living and to those who are in service.
And are the volunteering opportunities that you offer, are they like, do you offer an allowance, like a monetary allowance? And should volunteerism offer that?
This is an important point. Many times on similar platforms, people ask, do you pay volunteers? We don't pay volunteers. But however, we facilitate. For example, UNV, we facilitate through what we call a volunteer living allowance. This is not salary. This is not income. A volunteer who is providing service will need food, will need clothing, will need accommodation, will need transport. This living allowance is basically to help the volunteer to have some decent welfare while providing services. It has nothing to do with payment. So it's an allowance that we give. And for the time that this person has said, look, I've put my career at hold in order to do some volunteering, we recognize that by providing or by facilitating the time that they are volunteering. And when you say we, I want to clarify that we don't deploy volunteerism in UNV projects. Volunteers are deployed with our partners, UN partners, in their numbers in the UN system. What we do is to identify the volunteers and then provide such volunteers profiles to our partners to make a choice, and then that's where they deliver. So at any given time, these volunteers are facilitated at that level, including management, including protection, insurance, health insurance covers, and so forth. When they are serving, especially UN volunteers, we look at them, we consider them as part of UN UN staff, so that they are not discriminated. They are just considered like anybody else. When there is security evacuation, they are also considered within that cover. Health, they are covered. They have a very good health cover in case they fall sick while they are serving. So volunteering is sometimes not considered to be, I mean, it comes at a cost as far as making sure that the volunteers are facilitated to perform their duties.
Great. And do you partner with the private sector? Do you support it in their volunteering journey? And if not, do you think that the private sector should also embed volunteering as a tool to increase productivity and contribute to social responsibility?
Interesting question. I think the private sector is warming up to the reality of our times. Private sector, they have the corporate social responsibility programs where they do one thing or the other. But we are saying to the private sector, the days where they would paint a classroom, go and play with children in the children's ward once, build some trees once, and then they go around the globe saying corporate social responsibility, we did this once a day in 365 days, may not be effective. They need to look after the environment where they are making their business and profits. To the extent possible that we encourage a private sector we are working with them, by the way. We work with the private sector, but we're encouraging them to get closer to national, regional, international development frameworks like the SDGs, the Agenda 30, and identify a systematic way in which they can contribute to that. Not through monetary, but adopting certain ways in which they can collaborate either with government or either with NGOs, with civil society to deliver on specific SDGs. Yes, the private sector are warming up to new ways of volunteering beyond corporate social responsibility.
We still have many questions, but you are running out of time. So I'm going to ask one last question, and we can just keep the conversation going offline or online on social media maybe. So what are your concluding messages to all actors in the volunteering ecosystem?
I think my appeal and my carrying call is that volunteerism is growing, and we need to increasingly find ways in which we can enhance and strengthen the recognition of volunteering. We've helped member states to come up with policies, but we want to move a gear up. We want to provide evidence. We want to broker knowledge so that whoever wants to design a program that is anchored on volunteerism for its delivery, they have the information, they have the empirical data, if I may use that word, that will help them to design programs that will be effective. So I'm calling upon the sector players in the volunteering world to join hands, especially with UNV, in our new approach of strengthening volunteerism through knowledge brokering, evidence, and data. And we think that we can make a difference for the delivery of the SDGs. And the very last point is that to the member states, we'll continue to say, please integrate volunteerism in your national development frameworks. Volunteerism is a strong, very strong cross-cutting means of implementation.
Thank you, Dr. Tapiwa. With this call to action to governments, we will be ending our KnowTalk session. And this is also a wrap to the special edition of KnowTalks held live from the Frankfurt Book Fair. Stay tuned and follow us on our social media platforms to know about future KnowTalks. Thank you.